right, everybody, we are coming to the grand conclusion of the book of Revelation. You remember how I keep saying there's all these boring parts, and I just want to get through them. I just want to get to the good stuff. We're at the good stuff. So last week, what we did in our study was we talked about the fate of those who stood against Jesus. Last week was a judgment. This week we will see how the other half lives. So in chapter 21, who wants to read verses 1 through 8, please?
Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth has passed away. All there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell within them, and they shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, no sorrow, no crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things has passed away. Then he who sat on the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said to me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. And he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give of the foundation of the water of life freely to him who thirsts. He who overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be their God, and they shall be my son. But the cowardly, unbelieving, abominable murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death.
All right. So after the wicked were punished, God gathered his people before destroying not just the earth, but heaven as well. They pass away, and he's going to make a new heaven, new earth. Got that? Okay. So both were tainted by the presence of sin, as Satan had roamed in both. We see that. We see spiritual warfare going on. We've seen it in Revelation, the great war in heaven, and Satan being cast down and defeated. We see it in Job, where Satan comes and he questions God. If you've ever read the book Heaven is for Real, he mentions seeing Satan like trying to battle against and ram up against heaven. So both have been tainted by the presence of sin. God can't tolerate that. He allows it now, but he will not tolerate it forever. He will not tolerate it for long. So he destroys even heaven for being tainted by sin. No longer will there be danger or separation. We will no longer be separated from each other, nor from God. While there will be an initial time of tears, God will eliminate sadness for a final time. Let me say this. Many of you have heard and have asked over the years, we've done some Stump the Preacher and stuff like that. People say, well, we won't remember each other in heaven. This verse is where that comes out of, where it says that he will wipe every tear away from their eye. Well, if people that I love go to hell, that will make me sad. Therefore, we must not remember anybody. But it doesn't say nobody will know each other, because again, we saw that with the martyrs. They remembered being martyred. They knew who each other was. They knew who they were. They knew how they had died, and they, were proclaiming God's judgment upon the people who had slain them. But this verse is entirely where they get that from. That God will wipe every tear from their eye. And the idea is, it's, there are different tenses in Greek that we don't really have. But it's a one-time action that stops forever, is the verb tense. So there may be an initial time of mourning for seeing these people go in. But God wipes the tears from our eyes. And we are never sad again. Okay? You guys with me so far? All right. There will be no more death or loss or disabilities or cancer, or thorn bushes, or broken down cars, or spiders, or politics, or mortgages. Nothing bad will ever be in heaven ever again. Who's looking forward to that? I can't wait to get to a place where I never have to hear the word cancer ever again. That's a big one to me. This time it is Jesus who sits upon the throne. Let me go into a side rant. So I use to prepare these newer version of the NIV. It came out in 2011 as opposed to the one that was made in 1984 that's still really the most popular in our churches. One change I don't like, you'll notice I have a red letter edition. The words of Jesus are in red. For some reason, they decided to make this not red anymore. That doesn't make any sense to me. Because he describes the same titles that Jesus has been used for in Revelation over and over and over again. So I disagree with the decision of whatever translator decided that would not be red lettering anymore. I think that's... It's not red in yours either?
I got one here, but not here.
I thought it was my old one. But, yeah, I disagree with that. I think that should be red lettering, words of Jesus. But as Jesus described as sitting on the throne, he proclaims that he is making all things new. And then he says, it is finished. What is that? In verse 6. This one says, it is done. But this in the Greek, it's the same, it is finished. It's the same words, the same proclamation of victory that Jesus used over the cross. He's going to use it again. It's finished. It's done. It's not just that the world is over, that these things are gone. Jesus is saying, I have complete and total victory. I've won. Satan's still, going to war. He's still fighting battles, and we see these and we suffer for him every day. But the war is over. Jesus already said it. He repeats the titles used in the section of judgment. Used to describe Jesus, he used them for himself here. God will no longer be distant, but will have intimacy with his people. No cowards, immoral, those who swear, those who use the Ouija boards, those who have ever told a lie, cheat on their taxes, keep going, whatever it be, will ever be allowed in heaven. All humans are found on that list. Let's be real sure about that. We used to have a game that we would do in youth group growing up here, and the youth area was just one of the classrooms upstairs was all of the youth. But if somebody got caught telling a lie, it was this little song. You go, Revelation, Revelation, 21:8, 21:8. Liars go to hell, liars go to hell. Burn, 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 burn. Everybody's on this list. Don't mistake that. Where he's saying nobody who's this or that and the other. Everybody's on this list. Nobody's perfect. But, big exception here. Jesus is willing to wipe out the volumes of our sin. And again, it goes back to last week where he has the books where he accuses everybody of their sin. And then there's the Lamb's Book of Life. So he's willing to use his blood to cover over that multitude of sins. And then write our names in that Lamb Book of Life. So that's why no one who does those things can ever enter there, because those sins will not remain due to the blood of Jesus. Someone read verses 9 through 14, please.
One of the seven angels who had the seven bowls full of the seven last plagues came and said to me, Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a mountain great and high, and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. It shone with the glory of God, and its brilliance was like that of a very precious jewel, like a jasper, clear as crystal. It had a great high wall with 12 gates, and with 12 angels at the gates. On the gates were written the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. There were 3 gates on the east, 3 on the north, 3 on the south, and 3 on the west. The wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb.
All right. Don't miss this. This is set up a contrast to where we've been the last few weeks. In contrast to Babylon and its destruction, the angel now took John to another city, Jerusalem. Just as Babylon represented Rome, so Jerusalem here is representing heaven. Okay? Now, what makes this kind of confusing is in the first part of this, we saw a new Jerusalem coming down as a bride dressed for its bridegroom, and it seems to imply, in that case, Jerusalem represents God's people, because it's always the church that's referred to as the bride of Christ. But now it seems, now he's using New Jerusalem not seemingly to describe a people, but to describe a place. So it makes it a little bit confusing. Okay? Yeah, makes it a little bit confusing. All right, but it's the setup and contrast. Babylon represented Rome, represented the world. So it represents a city, but the city represents a people. So in this case, it can maybe kind of be a similar thing, that the New Jerusalem being heaven, representing a people, being the people of God. I don't know. It's blending metaphors or something. I don't know. But he sets out trying to describe what heaven looks like in this vision, where he is seeing it from the outside. And remember, just like when he's describing Jesus way back in chapter 1, John is trying to describe the indescribable. So that, give him a little bit of leeway. Well, why does he say, jasper and not, a diamond? Why doesn't he say quartz? Why doesn't he talk about platinum and only talks about gold? Now we know, platinum is better than gold or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Well, he's trying to use the best words he has to describe something that no human being can really, truly describe. All right, so that's part of what makes this hard. This new heaven it looks like a jewel. Each wall had 3 gates, and instead of St. Peter, you've all seen the pictures, St. Peter standing in front of a gate that's like half swung open, like the entrance to heaven is broke or something like that, and he's telling everybody, no, it says that there's an angel at each gate, and it's 12 gates, 3 on each wall. So the 12 tribes of Israel and the names of the 12 apostles were inscribed on the city walls, showing God's plan throughout the Bible, Old and New Testament. You got it? All right, somebody read verses 15 through 21, please.
The angel who talked with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city, its gates, and its walls. The city was laid out like a square, as long as it was wide. He measured the city with a rod and found it to be 12,000 stadia in length, and as wide and high as it is long. He measured its wall, and it was 144 cubits thick by man's measurement, which the angel was using. The wall was made of jasper, and the city of pure gold, as pure as glass. The foundations of the city walls were decorated with every kind of precious stone. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third
agate.
Thank you. The fourth emerald, the fifth sardonyx, the sixth carnelian, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. The 12 gates were 12 pearls, each gate made of a single pearl. This great city, the great street of the city was pure gold, like transparent glass.
All right. Yours uses some different names than what mine tries to use to translate them. It uses bigger names. So the measuring rod here is a reference to a vision given to the prophet Ezekiel, showing that heaven was greater than any earthly temple. That's what we see in Ezekiel. It's meant to be a callback to that. To the Jewish readers would have understand that. These aren't again, like every other number we've talked about, aren't meant to be understood as literal dimensions. All right? They represent that it's a city beyond imagining. Yeah, you want to talk about big. I don't know if yours has it, but 200 feet is just the thickness of the wall. That's a big wall. You know, it says it's about 1,400 miles each side, or each wall of the city. Big. All right? So he's basically saying it's beyond imagining. Yours says 15? Mine says 14. But interestingly, if you've ever read the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, when it comes to the last battle, at the very end of all things, the kids are there for basically the book of Revelation happening to Narnia. And it describes them going into this area where in Narnia the Garden of Eden basically still stood, but now people were allowed to venture into it. And it describes that, like, inside of the walls of this area were bigger than what was on the outside. That it had an infinite amount of space on the inside, though it looked limited on the outside. Very interesting take. Yeah, like a Mary Poppins bag.
Just now.
Huh?
I was thinking of Mary Poppins bag.
Yeah. This is an interesting look at it by C.S. Lewis. That there are not just one world, but worlds inside of the city wall. So, very, very interesting take on it. In this case, the wall is not meant to keep anyone out, for only God's people will remain. Only God's people are on the new heaven and the new earth. So it's not meant to prevent anybody from coming in, because everybody that was prevented from coming in is already elsewhere. But they're showing that there's like utter safety and peace within, that it's an unassailable city. This would have been very important to them who lived in walled cities. To us, doesn't mean much, but you know, that's not the way we function in modern society. But they would have understood this. Gold is not precious in heaven. There's no preacher's joke about a guy who dies and he made a bargain with God that he's allowed to take 12 gold bricks with him up into heaven. And when he gets to heaven, the angel at the gate says, you can't bring it bad in here. Don't you know you can't take it with you? He's like, no, God gave me permission. And he opens up this briefcase of his life savings. He's like 12 gold bars. And he goes, well, okay, God said, I guess you can bring it in, but I don't understand why you brought in pavement. You know, it's literally what the streets are made out of. But the gold is not precious. The people that are within is what is precious. Okay? That's the main thing. The precious stones in the gates are similar to the stones representing the 12 tribes worn in the priestly garb by Aaron and his descendants in the Old Testament. All right, so when the tabernacle, which was the precursor to the temple, is first constructed, they create this outfit that like every high priest wore for generations, and in it had 12 stones that one represented each of the tribes. It's kind of where we get our birthstones thing today from, actually. Anyway, those 12 stones representing the 12 tribes, they're reflected here like a stone around each gate representing those 12 tribes, which I already said the names are inscribed to them, so it's kind of doubling up on that. The 12 gates are not pearly. Notice that. It says that. They're not pearly gates. They're literal pearls. Just like, you know, dozens of feet thick is a giant pearl. Yeah, it's a big oyster. That sand really irritated the heck out of that oyster if it made that sucker. But, you know, that's one of those things that people always picture because of how it's been portrayed in media. Well, it's not remotely how it's portrayed here. Somebody read verses 22 through 27, please.
I did not see a temple in the city, because the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. The city does not need the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and the Lamb is its lamp. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their splendor into it. On no day will its gates ever be shut, for there will be no nights there. The glory and honor of the nations will be brought into it. Nothing impure will ever enter it, nor will anyone who does what is shameful or deceitful, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life.
All right, so unlike Jerusalem at its peak, you know, when it's David and Solomon ruling Jerusalem, what's Solomon build? This great and glorious temple that God blesses. Again, showing how this new Jerusalem will be far greater than even the best Jerusalem has to offer. There is no temple. Why? Because temples were a place where people met with priests to ask them to speak to a god on their behalf. In this city, people will meet with God directly, Father, Son, and Spirit. How cool is that? I heard Bob Russell, preach the Southeast for years. He's like, man, I can't wait to get to heaven. Because I figure there's going to be like sign-up sheets of what you want to do and stuff. And it's like, you go, hey, Jesus, you want to go fishing? I'd love to go fishing with you. And since, he can be omnipresent and everywhere at once, he can go fishing with everybody one at a time. All at the same time. So, it's an interesting way to look at it. But we're going to have that kind of closeness with God. Literally reach out and touch him. That's a big deal. That's what God wants for us. That's how he chooses to bless us. And again, paid the price through the death of Jesus to allow us to do that. That's amazing. That's what God chooses to do. Whereas hell was a place of darkness, heaven will not even have so much as a shadow. If there is a building between you and God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, there'll still not be a shadow cast by it. Their light will just light up everything and everywhere. It'll pierce through everything. It's amazing. Unlike the first heaven that was tainted by Satan's presence, the second heaven will not have any kind of impurity. All right, let me say this. We didn't have time to get to the second of our opening questions, but the second question was, what was the happiest moment of your life? And again, there's this pervasive thing in our culture of, well, heaven will just be like you spend forever in whatever was the happiest moment of your life. So if it was, some hunting trip, if it was, your honeymoon, if it was wherever it would be, whatever the happiest moment of your life was, it'll just be like that forever. Only even the best moments of our life aren't perfect. God's going to give us perfect. So it's even going to be far beyond those things that we can imagine. Even, those happiest moments won't compare to a single second in heaven. And again, refer to C.S. Lewis again. One of his other things that he believed is like, the first time you do something, that's when it's the most exciting, the most fun. Like if you ride a roller coaster was like the example he used. Like the first time you get that adrenaline rush, it's just an amazing thing. And the second time you go, you're trying to recreate that. But if you ride the same roller coaster over and over and over again, it just loses its thrill.
Yep.
He said in heaven, you'll never have that jadedness, that decreasing return of pleasure and excitement and happiness. It'll be like the first time something good happened every time. Maybe even increasing as it goes on. It's a very interesting look at it. So was it one of your sons you were talking to? Who was it? Somebody said, like, they're afraid they're going to get bored in heaven. There'll be no such thing as boredom in heaven.
Yeah, he was afraid that
And again, C.S. Lewis, he said he ends out the Chronicles of Narnia with them getting to this, their heaven, and he says, "This is not where adventures ended. This is where adventures finally began." So, it's a very, very interesting thought, and we ain't done yet. Chapter 22. Somebody read verses 1 through 5, please.
Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, as clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb. Down the middle of the great street of the city, on each side of the river, stood the tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit, yielding its fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. No longer will there be any curse. The throne of God and of the Lamb will be in the city, and his servants will serve him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. There will be no more night. They will not need the light of a lamp or the light of the sun, for the Lord God will give them light, and they will reign forever and ever.
All right, so within the city is a paradise that puts even the Garden of Eden to shame. Jesus called himself the living water on earth, and now living waters flow from him through the city. The tree of life given to Adam and Eve to grant them life, when they sinned, that should say was given to Adam and Eve. Dadgum. Was given to Adam and Eve to grant them life. When they sinned, they were cut off from the garden and lost the fruit of the tree of life. Now it will span the river and constantly produce fruit for all of God's people. Its leaves will heal all hurts. No longer will there be hurts between nations and people, for we will be one people of God. No part of the curse, and you go to Genesis 3, you can read all about the curse and all the things that enacted death and painful childbearing and snakes being creepy and thorn bushes and droughts and all the bad stuff in this world all kicks in for the curse. And so here you kind of have the undoing of that. By the way, no more curse. Be done. God will go from a face that not even John could describe to a face that we will see up close. That's pretty cool, isn't it? And again, where it says like there'll be no more night, just want to point this out again. With the pearly gates, giant pearl gates, they'll never close because the gates close at night to protect the city, so they'll never close. I personally think at heaven, like, I think it'll still be, beyond what we think it will be. Because the nature of God won't change when we get to heaven, and part of the nature of God that He is creator. So I think there'll be times where He'll just be like, hey, you know what'd be fun? Let's climb a mountain that no one's ever climbed before. There, I made a new mountain. Let's go climb it. Why would He stop? I mean, He's still God, right? So why would He change His nature? So, those kind of things get to me and just think, can't wait to see, what's beyond all that we could ask or imagine. I can't wait to find out what that looks like up close.
Josh,
Yep.
if heaven's perfect and we have no pain, no suffering, why do we need a tree that has healing leaves?
I think, I think part of it's symbolic. It's mentioned earlier in the Old Testament. It's kind of referenced that it's God has leaves for healing, and He adds healing of the nations. So I think it's meant to be kind of like wipe every tear from their eyes for the final time. It'll heal all wounds, even the internal ones. My depression and times where we were hurt by other people and those things that we have a hard time letting go of.
So it kind of goes along with.
Yeah, I think it'll be again, like a sense of finality that it'll heal all wounds permanently. I think that's where it's going. If it's an answer other than that, God knows it. So, but that's my best understanding of it.
That could almost be Stump the Preacher, but that could be.
Yeah. So I need somebody to have questions. I've been looking around all night just waiting for somebody to ask questions, so I'm glad that finally somebody did.
I kind of have a worry.
Oh, worry. Okay.
You know, and it's like I hate to even say it out loud because I feel like I shouldn't think that, but I just have this still, I guess, the unbelievable feeling. Like I feel like it's just
Too good to be true?
Yeah. And it's like I know, you know, and it's not like I don't believe in it, obviously, but it's hard to wrap my head around it. I guess that's normal. I don't know. But it's like
It is.
I just think of the people that I love that have passed away, and like, you know, are they really enjoying it? You know.
Mm-hmm. And again, that goes back to, for all of us, everything we know in life is too good to be true. And like I said, even those best and happiest moments of our life aren't perfect. This would be C.S. Lewis class tonight. C.S. Lewis, if you don't know this, was a high intellectual type, college professor, and was friends with another high intellectual type, J.R.R. Tolkien, that wrote The Lord of the Rings. And they used to debate all the time. Specifically, C.S. Lewis, one of the most prolific Christian authors of the 1940s through like 60s, was an atheist and used to argue against the existence of God and everything like that with Tolkien, who challenged him one day to prove it. And so Lewis set out to do exactly that. And in trying to comb through as much evidence as possible to disprove Christianity, he converted to Christianity because he couldn't disprove it. One of the things he came down to as a part of his philosophy was that, like, if nothing we've ever experienced in this world is perfect, why do we desire perfection? There must be something out there, because everything else we desire has a fulfillment. And again, this is C.S. Lewis's philosophy. Part of what got him thinking got him there. He came through it through more of a philosophical standpoint, if that makes sense. So anyway, he said, like, we get hungry and we have food. We get thirsty and we have water. We get lonely and there are other people. How can we desire perfection if there's not a fulfillment of it? Well, there's no fulfillment of it here, but maybe there is. I'll also say this, as far as the worries and the doubts of, is this too good to be true? Is it possible that a God this good and this amazing could really love someone as bad as me? Is that really possible? A verse that comes to mind says that faith is being certain of things that we hope for and believing in the things we do not see. So to that, I would say those doubts, those worries, not only they're normal, they're kind of actually a good thing. That's kind of the whole point, you know. And again, going back to early in Revelation, where we see all this destructive crap, and we see the world put in spiritual terms, and we see to them persecution, we see their world collapsing around them, and coming in on them. You can see why this makes such a big difference, because all of us have this crap, right? Okay. Maybe none of us had ever had to choose between worshiping a false god and having our kid be beheaded, you know. But we've all been through crap. And we may not always see a way out of the crap. And, you know, we hear these things over and over again about, You know, there is no God, there is no heaven. We see all these lies being told into us. But in the end, just like them, you know, John sees this. They're just reading the same letter we are. And they go, through all the crap, you hang on to this. Because it's not done yet. When you're in doubt, when you're in struggling, when the world is crushing in on you, what does he say? Right there in chapters 2 and 3, to every single one of them. If you can overcome, there's a reward. Yes, there will be doubts. Yes, there will be suffering. Yes, there will be pain. Yes, there will be loss. He even writes them about people in their church that had already been martyred. There's going to be loss. There's all this stuff going on. But if you overcome, there's a reward on the other side. And that's what it's all been building to. And that's, you know, where we're at tonight, is the reward on the other side. But, you know, it is important to remember the reason we have church. You know, a church is a gathering of believers. And the reason we are commanded to not stop gathering together is because we have crap, and we have suffering, and we have doubts, and we have worries, and we have pressure, and we have all this stuff going on. And we're supposed to encourage each other, just as John is encouraging these churches. Because what's the old saying? You've either in a period of like suffering in your life right now. You've just come out of a period of suffering and testing in your life, or you're just getting ready to go into a period of suffering and testing in your life. Those are your only three options. There's not a point where like, I'm done, I have passed the test, until we get here. And that's why it's so important for Christians to gather. You know, it's the old thing you hear it all the time as a preacher, like, now I've become a Christian, do I have to go to church? No, you get to go to church. You know, because there's all this crap in the world, and oh, Christianity's a crutch. You darn bet it is, and I got a limp. You know, we need each other. Sunday mornings doesn't cut it. That's why I love life groups. That's why life groups was my passion. That's why it was the direction I went to in ministry, right from the get-go. My first full-time ministry was life groups, and you know, still active in them here. And I told Jared, you know, you get more into that position. My goal is to be your resource and your right-hand man. You know, I'm going to be your big encourager because I've been through a lot of that stuff, and so I'm here to back you up. We all need it. And Sunday mornings don't cut it. Certainly the people, you know, who never come to church, I don't get it. You know, like you mentioned, you know, loss. When I lost Dad, it's, you know, the biggest loss of my life. It's one of the most, you know, traumatic things I've gone through in my life. He left a big hole in a lot of lives. And the thing I kept coming back to was, how do people in the world do it? Because I believe that this is 100% true. I believe that my dad is literally, currently, in heaven, in the very presence of Jesus. You know, and it's that verse out of 1 Thessalonians that we don't mourn like those who have no hope, because we have hope. As hard as that was getting through, I had people telling me stories about Dad, and the funeral was 2.5 hours long because we had an open mic time where people could get up and tell funny stories and stuff like that. And I kept thinking, as hard as this is, how does someone who does not have our hope, who doesn't believe in heaven, or who maybe believes in heaven, but you know, they've lost somebody who didn't follow God, how do people get through that? Because this is so insanely tough. when I believe my dad's not dead, he's just done suffering. And I just can't wait to get where he is. How do the people who don't have that, how do you survive? If you if you don't have the belief and the faith that we have, and let's say it's your kid that is the 1 in a million chance that doesn't make it, how do you get through that? If you don't believe that there's a heaven and that there's a God